Hi, I'm Tilo Young, and this is Small Jobs. Hi, I'm Tilo, and welcome back to the shop. Last time we spoke about the question of atheism, God or no God, and this time we're going to talk about which God. There are a lot of different claims to God. In Christianity, we worship what we believe to be a resurrected human, which is a pretty unique claim. In fact, the only other religion that I have found that offers a lot of testable evidence to see if it can be true is Mormonism. There are numerous claims by Joseph Smith about the indigenous people of the Americas, where they came from, and what their societies looked like. And these would all be unknown to a man in the 1820s in America. And over the time since Mormonism began, we've had a lot of discovery to inform us on this question. Things like DNA. Were these actually one of the tribes of Israel on the Americas? And the answer is no. Were there chariots? Well, no, they didn't even have the wheel. Were there swords and shields? No, they didn't have the ability to work with metals. So, in as much as they did give us a lot of testable evidence, it all fails. Most other religions tend to give us things that are only testable by personal experience, but not really in an objective way. Well, in Christianity, we have this claim of a resurrected man, and that is a pretty big claim. And I'd like to propose that we approach this question as simply a matter of history, as a historical event, like we would question any other historical event. Now, I've heard it many times where people say, well, yes, the Christians believe Jesus rose from the dead, and these people believe this, and these people believe that. And that's true. As a matter of fact, I would say that when a Muslim radical flies a plane into a building or blows himself up in a crowd, it's pretty certain that he believes what he's saying sincerely. He believes that it's true. And there is one stark difference that I'd like to look at, and that's that the early evangelists, the earliest Christians, believed their claim was true, but their claim wasn't merely Jesus is God. Their claim was we saw him after he was crucified. We watched him die. We put our fingers in the hole in his side. We spent 40 days with him after his resurrection. And this is a pretty big claim. And I would like to approach this giving you an analogy. When you sit on a jury in a courtroom, what you're really asked is a historical question. There's a claim that this person did this thing at this time, and you're asked, is this true? Did he do this? And so let's put forth this hypothetical case where, say, some big mob boss is on trial. And there are a lot of witnesses that are lined up to testify. Now, these witnesses are all in fear of their lives because the mob is going to kill them for testifying. They've told them they're going to kill them. They've had friends killed. They've had property confiscated. And they're not cheered by their neighborhood. As a matter of fact, everybody in their community pretty much despises them for testifying. Nobody wants them to say this. And yet, even though some of those witnesses have been killed, other ones step forward with this same fear of being killed and losing friends and life and property, and they go ahead and testify, yes, I saw him, and he killed the man. I'd say that any reasonable person sitting on that jury would find that is a credible testimony. Well, this is in fact what the apostles were saying, and this was their testimony. We saw him, we touched him. And so there are some basic facts that are pretty much agreed to by all serious scholars that aren't sitting out on the fringe somewhere. And those include that Jesus was a man, a rabbi, a teacher who traveled around at the beginning of the first century AD, that he had followers, that he performed some kind of what we call miracles, but it's actually even recorded in the Jewish writings as sorcery. So they didn't deny that he did these things. They simply ascribed the power to do them as something demonic. But nonetheless, they seem to have acknowledged that, yes, he did these things. And so with this in mind, we also can see that the apostles truly believed they had seen and touched him after he had risen from the dead. And so how do we account for this from a purely historical perspective, this claim that he rose from the dead? Well, there have been a few attempts. One was what was called the swoon theory, that he actually didn't die. He just looked like he was dead, and then 3 days later he rose. And they saw him, and they were like, oh my gosh, he's back from the dead. But what's given in the accounts and in the early preaching is not somebody with holes in them crawling out of a cave after having been crucified, which the likelihood of somebody surviving all of this is ridiculously small, but the likelihood of somebody seeing a person coming out of that situation and worshiping him as a resurrected Messiah is impossible. I mean, this person would have been, if he were very fortunate, maybe able to crawl. And obviously was somebody who just didn't die. So that's one theory that was proposed to answer this. Another one, the very earliest one that we even see in Scripture, is that the disciples stole the body. Well, if they did that, remember, they spent their lives being persecuted and losing friends and property and family, and they would have known it was a lie that they stole the body. Nobody suffers the things they suffered for something they know isn't true, and they would have to have known that it wasn't true. There's another theory that was proposed, I think it was in the 1800s, of something of a mass hallucination, that all of these people hallucinated. Well, we really don't have any record of mass hallucinations. These are individual events that happen in an individual human brain. And to have this happen over and over by a large number of people, St. Paul recounts over 500, I believe was the number. I could be wrong, check that. That witnessed this. So you had somebody like St. Paul, who was a highly respected Pharisee, who had all of the prestige and honor that his community, that his culture could bestow upon somebody. This was his life. And somebody like that having such a hallucination or knowingly following something that wasn't true and lying about seeing him on the road to Damascus and in return receiving a life of beatings and shipwrecks and persecution and ultimately death doesn't seem to really fit what we would understand in any reasonable view of history. So I really believe that the whole question of Christianity and whether it's true comes down to this one question: did Christ rise from the dead? We could go on about questioning these things, and I think there's much more evidence for somebody who wants to dig deeper, but I think the answer comes back very clearly: yes, he rose from the dead. That's the most clear and rational explanation to the facts that we have in front of us. Somebody making up this story certainly wouldn't name themselves in the narrative as hiding in a room while the women went down to go take care of the body, especially Middle Eastern men, if any of you know them. That's pretty embarrassing. We were hiding and the women went and found that he had resurrected, and then we came out. So there are just a whole lot of reasons why an alternate explanation of this narrative simply doesn't work very well. I hope this was useful as a basic introduction to the subject, and that's all these videos are intended to be, as introductions. They're not intended to go in depth, but I would highly encourage you to go further. There are many great resources out there that examine this question, and there are many really interesting skeptics who didn't believe this story of Jesus, that set out to disprove it, and ultimately were converted by that evidence, including a former head of Harvard Law in the 1800s and many others. So I would encourage you to begin to dig into the question of this resurrection as a historical event rather than just a religious question, and see if it looks very likely that Jesus Christ was God, and evidenced this through miracles and through raising himself from the dead. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great afternoon.